Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar, Telling the Truth About the Border, a Humane Vision for Border Management. My name is Kevin Appleby. I'm the Senior Fellow for Policy and Communications at the Center for Migration Studies, and welcome to our webinar. Before introducing our speakers, let me set the stage for our discussion. For those of you who haven't been following it, we've had quite a heated immigration debate across the country over the last several months and within Congress. There was a bipartisan agreement on border policy, which was mainly a restrictive one that included a higher standard to access the asylum system, increased powers to close the border under certain circumstances, increased detention capability, and extra powers to expedite removals in the country. It looks like that proposal is dead. It wasn't included in the Senate version of the supplemental, but of course, it's never dead until Congress goes home. So those ideas are still out there. Those policy proposals are still out there, as well as other proposals from the House. So there's still, the debate is still going on, and these policies are still being lively considered. At the same time, we also heard this morning that the Biden administration is considering an executive order that would implement some of these proposals as well, including making it more difficult to access asylum and powers for the Border Patrol to remove people more expeditiously, especially those who don't meet the new credible fear standard. So within this environment, we've seen that the loudest voices on these issues spend little or no time at the border, maybe long enough to get a photo op, but don't live the border every day, don't know the intimate issues in the border communities and what the realities are, especially from the humanitarian perspective. So we're privileged to have four experts here to talk about that, who have lived on the border, who live the border, and who work with migrants every day and with the community and responding to migration at our southern border. So I'm going to introduce them first in the order that they are going to speak, and then they will speak. Once they're done, we'll have time for questions and answers. And you can put you're going to have to write your question in the Q&A box, and we will try to get to as many as possible. We can't do it over the speaker because we have so many participants, but we will attempt to get to as many of your questions as possible, and we'll go the latest 2 p.m. Eastern. So let me introduce our speakers. I'll introduce them all first, and then I'll call on Bishop to start. Our first speaker is the Most Reverend Mark Seitz, who is the Bishop of El Paso, Texas, and he's also the chairman of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops Committee on Migration. So he also speaks, when he speaks, he also speaks for the bishops throughout the country. Our second speaker will be Joanna Williams. She's the executive director of the Kino Border Initiative, which is in Nogales, Arizona, and also they have operations in Nogales, Mexico. Welcome, Joanna. Our third speaker will be Guerline Jozef. She's the co-founder and executive director of the Haitian Bridge Alliance, which is based in San Diego, California. And last but not least is Dylan Corbett, who's the executive director of the Hope Border Institute in El Paso, Texas. So quite wonderful speakers to talk a little bit about what the reality is and to sort of dispel some of the myths that we see out there, and also to react to some of the proposals that are out there and perhaps suggest humane alternatives. So with that introduction, I'll call on Bishop Seitz to begin the discussion. Welcome, Bishop.
Thank you very much, Kevin. It's good to be with you and the Center for Migration Studies. The issue of immigration to our country has been one of concern among our elected officials and American public for some time. As a resident of the border, I share that concern, but more about how certain public policies may impact the human person, the asylum seeker and migrant from wherever they hail. Immigration is looked on by many as an enforcement issue, a legal issue, or a social issue. From the church perspective, immigration is a human issue, specifically about the human rights and human dignity of the person. That is where we begin. The recent border agreement, which weakened asylum protections for asylum seekers, among other items, would have violated human rights from the church perspective. It would have made it more difficult for bona fide asylum seekers to even qualify for a hearing before a judge. It would also have increased deportation powers for law enforcement. Combining decreased protection with increased enforcement is a dangerous formula, which would lead to the return of the persecuted back to the dangerous situations which they fled. We believe that there are ways to manage our southern border without sacrificing human rights. There are several principles I would like to share to guide our lawmakers in the future. First, the right of asylum is enshrined in both domestic and international law, not to mention Catholic teaching, and should not be abridged. Weakening due process in this regard would encourage asylum seekers to seek other ways to escape persecution, increasing irregular migration and strengthening smuggling networks. Our elected officials need to find ways to reduce backlogs by making the process more fair, efficient, and timely without sacrificing due process. Secondly, family units should be treated with respect and dignity. Placing ankle monitors on them and subjecting them to an expedited process of deportation violates this principle, even more so detaining more people in basically prisons. That is a horrible experience that leaves lasting scars on families. We encourage DHS to return to a community-based alternative to detention model in which families receive case management services and an opportunity to obtain legal representation. We encourage this model for individual asylum seekers as well. We find that when people are accompanied this way, 95+% follow through on their hearings. Thirdly, southern border would stabilize our elected officials if our elected officials looked at all aspects of our broken immigration system. An emphasis on legal avenues would protect migrants and asylum seekers, weaken smuggling networks, and help meet our labor needs. We also need a concerted effort from the US and other nations to address the root causes of flight so that migrants and asylum seekers can remain in their homelands and raise their families in safety. Funds directed there instead of to these deterrent measures at the border, we believe would be much better spent. Finally, despite common misunderstanding, the church teaches that there is a right of nations to control and manage their borders. This must be done, however, in a way that protects human dignity and human rights, in which due process rights are protected. We are failing this test. Certainly, the latest proposal on Capitol Hill does. Deterrence policies not only cause undue harm to the person, they fail over the long term as the forces driving persons to flee their homelands are stronger than anything that may block them. They're willing to risk their lives. They're willing to do anything in order to escape the situations that are death dealing where they live. I encourage our elected officials to return to bipartisan immigration reform talks that repair an immigration system that is outdated and unworkable. Instead of using immigration as a political issue, they should show their statesmanship and find humane and workable solutions which serve both the interests of our nation and those who seek to migrate here. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop, for your statement. Joanna?
Thanks so much for joining. It's good to see many Kino Border Initiative names in those who are attending, and I'm grateful to meet so many of you who are less familiar with our work. Kind of with that framing of what Bishop offered to us, I think the idea is that we're looking at the different parts of the border and the different realities of the border that we see between the three of us, because we are in. Sometimes I say to understand what perception someone has of a border, I always ask, which part of the US-Mexico border have you been to? Because there is a great diversity as well in experiences. So just to briefly talk about our particular corridor, which is here, the Arizona-Sonora corridor of the border. Since July 2023, our area of the border has actually been the primary corridor of migration, which has been surprising in many ways because so much of the migration in the previous years had been through South Texas. Almost half of the people who were detained in the month of January were detained in southern Arizona. So we're making up a significant portion of folks crossing the border. And the Kino Border Initiative primarily works on the Mexican side of the border. So our shelter, our humanitarian services, our food, medical, all of that is for people who are stranded on the Mexican side of the border. And I'm going to speak about some of those realities shortly, but I want to actually start by talking a little bit about the US side of the border. Start with something positive, which is that I think something I really cherish in this corridor is the great coordination in reception on the US side of the border that's being done between local governments and between nonprofits. So we have here in the Tucson area, which includes Nogales, Arizona, Casalitas, which is a work of Catholic Community Services, is in charge of reception, and it's just shown an incredible possibility and strength and adaptation to the different moments of migration, especially these increases in numbers. So just to give an example, in September, all of a sudden Border Patrol started releasing people in Nogales, Arizona, instead of driving them up to Tucson, Arizona to release them at the Casalitas shelter. And within 2 to 3 days, Casalitas already had a plan in coordination with Santa Cruz County and Pima County in order to ensure that those people were welcomed in a thoughtful way, in a way that was functional. And there's even coordination here between Tucson and Phoenix in order to distribute capacity. So I think we've done an admirable job on the US side of the border between different organizations and governments in being creative in our capacity. And that points us towards a best practice of where we can move and support from a policy perspective. Unfortunately, a lot of this welcoming infrastructure has been built up is at the risk of collapsing because of the lack of funding to continue to support that. So there was a great article yesterday or the day before in our local paper in which Bishop Weisenberger was quoted heavily that talks about this journey of how we've built up capacity and yet how fragile that is right now. So these policy decisions have real world implications in terms of the ways that we're able to live community and live welcome in Southern Arizona. But to switch to the Mexican side of the border, as I mentioned, we're primarily working with people who are stranded in Mexico, in the city of Nogales, Mexico. And although the migration along the border is really diverse and international, we're still seeing primarily Mexicans that are coming through our shelter. So in 2023, 76% of the people that we served were Mexican, and half of them were from the state of Guerrero. 83% of the people that Kino received over the course of the year reported that violence and persecution were their main reason for migration. And that's something we do intake services. All this data is from our intake surveys. That's a trend that we've seen on the rise in recent years. So in 2021, it was 67%. In 2022, it was 75%. As recently as 7 or 8 years ago, it was 20% of people that we were receiving were saying that violence and persecution was the main reason of migration. So this has dramatically changed the realities of migration, and the realities of Mexican migration specifically, I think, are oftentimes not reported on and not well known. So what we've seen in Mexico are a few dynamics that are driving increased migration. One is the fragmentation of organized crime groups. So I mentioned that Guerrero is one of our primary states of origin. And just to give an example, one family that we recently received was caught between warring groups in their town. So their town was controlled by a particular organized crime group. There was another one that was trying to gain control of the territory. So the group that controlled their town convened a town meeting and said that all of their families in that town had to commit one man of the family to join these actions to defend the organized crimes control, or else the whole family would be murdered. And that was what sparked this family to say, this is unsustainable, I have to get out of here. But that fragmentation is unusual in the history of Mexican organized crime. It used to be that there were fewer groups that had more consolidated control. And so this fragmentation is driving increased displacement. We've also seen, so we're a Jesuit organization and we work very closely with our partner Jesuit organizations throughout Mexico. And one of the realities that they were naming for me is this use of terror by organized crime. So we've had many years in which we've had high homicide rates and other kinds of violence in Mexico. But now organized crime groups are intentionally using more horrific practices to send a message and instill more fear in the population. They're using tactics like drone bombs in these communities. And so I think that affects people's decision making because people try to stay. I think the main message here is people try to stay in their community. They try really hard to stay in their community. And those kinds of moments of terror is what drives them out. And ultimately, the other reason that people who are trying to stay, even in fragile situations, don't stay because of impunity, because there's no faith that there will be justice against those crimes. So just a few months ago, we had a mom that I welcomed here to our shelter whose son had been disappeared by organized crime. She, together with other mothers, has been looking for her child in the state of Guerrero. She continued to search, even though the authorities told her, you really shouldn't be asking these questions. Members of organized crime started to threaten her. And finally, as she continued the search for justice, armed men arrived to her house. And that was what spurred her to say, there will be no justice in my town. This is absolute impunity. And the Mexican government right now has made a very concerted effort to cast aspersions on groups that are working on behalf of human rights, such as Centro Pro, which is one of our fellow Jesuit organizations that's done really important human rights work. So those who are pushing against the impunity are having their reputations besmirched. And another dynamic we see in Mexico is this continued persecution after displacement. So a woman, for example, who lived in Chiapas and experienced violence there, fled to the state of Chihuahua and tried to restart her life. But then the person who was persecuting her found her in Chihuahua, and that's what led her to flee in Nogales, to Nogales. So there is this interconnectedness. Even though Mexico is a large country, we're finding that people who are internally displaced are still not oftentimes in a safe place. And that's very troubling to us, this dynamic of violence that Mexicans are experiencing, because Mexicans are also the population that Border Patrol can return with the most impunity to Mexico without appropriately channeling them to the asylum process. And that's what we see on a regular basis. One recent example is a woman who was traveling with her 79-year-old mother and also her 5 children who had fled these abuse and threats. And she tried to plead her case. And Border Patrol agents told her, well, if you try to seek your asylum case, not only will you lose, but we're going to separate you from your mother, who in many ways at 79 years old was completely dependent on this woman. And so after days of pleading with the agents, she decided to sign involuntarily signed a voluntary return document because she thought that was the only way that she could be reunited with her mother. And in fact, they were actually returned separately to Nogales, so they weren't even reunited initially upon their return to Nogales. So there's this precarity that exists for all families, and I'm speaking about Mexicans because I know that Dylan and Guerline will talk about other populations. There's this precarity, and I think that the reason that I highlight that is because many of the policies in place assume a level of safety in Mexico, assume that Mexico is a legitimate place to return people who are Mexicans or of other nationalities, when in reality what we've seen is that this violence and impunity dramatically affects both Mexicans themselves and also others migrating through the area. So I think I'm running out of time, and later on in the questions and answer, I'd be more than happy to talk about legislation or other steps that could be taken to improve the situation, but at least to give you a perspective of what we're experiencing here.
Thank you, Joanna, and thank you for those stories. Guerline, welcome.
Thank you so much and good morning. It is a blessing to be with you all today. I am coming to you from the southern border in San Diego, where we are headquartered, but we are a national organization that provides support on both sides of the border. And we are one of the very few organizations that actually provide along the US-Mexico border in partnership with local organizations at every port of entry. So what that has allowed us to do is to give us a larger view of the entire border and how different each port of entry is, as you heard from my dear friend and colleague, Joanna, and how things, you know, in a larger view, as you heard from the most Reverend Mark. What we are seeing at the border is something that if you are not there, you cannot understand. What you read on the news, what you are in DC or in other places, you cannot really comprehend what we are experiencing at the border. In addition to that, as we are receiving people are going to different cities and states across the United States, in New York, in Chicago, in Boston, in Denver, and we hear the pleading of underserved communities as we see the scarcity mentality of how people are reacting to newly arriving immigrants, to newly arriving community members. And what we say is that we must welcome people with compassion, with dignity and love, because this is what we have been called to do. We focus on people of African descent from the Caribbean, from Africa, and also Afro-Latinx folks within the southern border. And what we are experiencing as people of African descent is an extra layer of both visibility and at the same time, completely erasure of those folks. As we see very clearly, as people are fleeing extreme conditions in Haiti, such as political turmoil, gang violence, or people fleeing Guinea or the Congo, we all know what's happening in the Congo right now. We see people fleeing slavery in Mauritania. We see people fleeing war in Kenya and in Cameroon. In addition, we are also receiving people from Pakistan, people from Eritrea, people from Palestine right now. We are receiving people from, I also already mentioned Afghanistan. So we are seeing people from around the world. And how do we respond in a way that is culturally appropriate and at the same time making sure people are safe? We understand clearly that people are fleeing those conditions in search of life itself. And I will repeat, whenever we meet a person, no matter where they are from, when we speak to them, they share with us that they are fleeing death in search of life. And how that happens is people will flee their country of origin. Most of them will end up in South America, mostly in Brazil or in Ecuador, and they will walk, and I repeat, they walk from Brazil, from Southern America, and they make their way to the US-Mexico border. The majority of them have to go to what is called the Darien Gap. The Darien Gap is one of the most dangerous places on earth. And we have been there. We've witnessed it and we've seen it through the jungle. People are dying as we are speaking. And I can share a few stories with you so that you can really understand the impact of our policies and how we in the US continue to push our borders all the way down to Panama, to Colombia, and other places, forcing people to have no other choice but to put their lives in the hands of human traffickers and smugglers, in turn that kidnap them and sometimes even kill them. As I was in the Darien a year ago, I met a woman from Venezuela, and she was carrying a 3-year-old girl on her back. And as I was looking at her and I saw the little girl wasn't responding. And we asked her, so how are you? How did you get here? She explained to us how she had to flee Venezuela and be able to make it, barely survive in Colombia, and then took the journey. When we met her in the middle of the Darien, I am sad to say that the baby had died on her back and she didn't even know it. And so now you imagine the trauma of fleeing your country, of having your most precious little girl die on your back, and survive the Darien yourself, should I say barely, to come to the US-Mexico border only to be received by violence and only to be turned back, or worse, put in prison and deported. And I can share with you the woman that we spoke to a couple of days ago from Haiti, who made the journey after surviving gang violence and sexual violence, barely survive, only to make the way to the US-Mexico border and to be told that she will not be received. In addition to that, she was pulled from the van she was traveling. As Black people, they cannot hide because the moment they show up, they know they are migrants, they know they are asylum seekers, and they become victim as prey to criminal organizations, smuggling networks, and kidnappers. She was kidnapped, sexually abused, and then were asked to call her family in the US and asking them to pay a ransom in order for her to be released. These are the realities of people in migration, people in search of life, and our policies. Instead of providing the protection, we are using deterrent tactics that once again serve as nothing as a weapon of destruction of life. So I wanted to share the stories with you so that you can know who those people are, because we hear on the news those narratives, and we want to make sure that we know that when we are in need of safety and protection, whether it is here or there, when home is in the mouth of a shark, we have no choice but to flee to find safety. So as we continue to push through, we are asking all of you to continue to join us in this fight for life, in this fight for protection, in this fight for safety, for people seeking asylum, for migrants making the journey at the US-Mexico border. I will stop here and I'll be able to answer more questions later. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Guerline. Appreciate your talk. Our final speaker is Dylan Corbett with the Hope Border Institute.
Hey everybody, wonderful to be with you all. I want to thank my co-panelists for their work, for their words, for their witness. There's an amazing community of leaders here at the border, and each of you are really role models and inspirations to me. I ditto everything that you said. You said it really well. And it's an honor for me to be able to present with you. Thanks to the Center for Migration Studies for putting this together. There are a lot of spaces that talk about the border without the border, and you're making sure that we flip the paradigm. And CMS has done a wonderful job to keep the Catholic community informed and together during these past couple turbulent months. And I want to thank them. You're meeting a really essential need. I want to frame what I'll say in three parts. First, some things that are working at the border. Then I want to talk about some things that are not working. And then the beginning of a couple things that we need to begin to do as a Catholic community. So first, what is working here at the border? You see it a lot on the media, the politicization, the chaos narrative. You hear a lot from pundits about what's happening. Despite what you see, and despite the real problems and the systemic challenges that we have, there are, particularly here where I am in El Paso, Texas, and Ciudad Juarez, there are some things that are working. There are some things that are going well at the border here in our area. And at root, it's really quite simple. We've tried wall building, we've tried increased enforcement. We know that those things don't work. They just don't work. Apart from the morality, and they are immoral, but apart from the morality, they just are not efficient and they don't work and they don't mitigate the flows of migrants, and they're not going to. It produces a lot of human damage. We know what does work, and it's at the risk of simplification, it's honor the law and make sure that it's effectively funded. Honor our obligations to people seeking asylum and other vulnerable migrants at the border, and ensure that the government and local border communities have the resources that they need to get the job done. It's that simple. And in many ways, we've made real strides toward that in El Paso. It's been through effective community organizing. It's been through a community that's resilient and that has worked on this for many years with a long tradition of faith-based hospitality, tenacity, and working together, collaboration across the faith sector, with our local officials, with our NGO community, working together, rowing in the same direction. And at this point, we've got some pretty critical elements in place here that weren't there even a couple of years ago. Our federal partners in the Border Patrol, they've now got the facilities to receive large numbers of migrants in El Paso, something they never had before. They're no longer under strain when the number of arrivals goes up. We don't have threats of street releases. We don't need to go into reactive emergency mode every time there's an increase in the arrivals. Our NGO community, our faith-based partners, providers of hospitality, and even our local governments, despite what you see about Texas in the media today, even our local governments in Texas, here in El Paso, we have the resources now to get the job done, particularly because of smart FEMA investments. Those have been critical. And again, in a way that we never did. So we're able to receive migrants processed from the government in a way that wasn't possible. In El Paso, we've worked hard to create an efficient welcoming system. And this is something that, as we speak, and I see there are some questions in the Q&A, the state of Texas is really threatening to destroy. So we need to double down and lift up what works. And the federal government is doing some other things as well that have been good because of the parole programs, for example, for Venezuelans, Nicaraguans, Cubans, and Haiti. Even though there have been a lot of migrants over the past year coming to the border, many did not have to make that difficult journey, and that gave us some breathing space, and it helped them to access the protection that they need. We also got rid of Title 42, and remember, that wasn't that long ago, which means a community like El Paso isn't straining under the weight of the arrival of a lot of people coming in irregularly. That's huge. That's critical for our hospitality network, for our local community in many ways. So there have been some good things despite the challenges. And what makes me mad, what's particularly angering, is that a lot of this was all at risk during the recent Senate negotiations. A lot of this was at risk of erasure. And it was all political. And we're not, I think as Kevin mentioned, we're still not out of the woods. So follow the law, fund it. Yes, we need other pathways, parole programs, visas, et cetera, but honor the law and our commitments to asylum seekers and vulnerable migrants and fund it. So what's not working? The border deaths, they're too high. the CBP-1, which is what the government is trying to force migrants to use to access protection at the border, it's just not cutting it for everyone who needs protection. That's what the deaths tell us. They're dying at record rates here in El Paso. More people, more women in particular than ever. There's a lot of pain in northern Mexico. Joanna spoke to that. There's a lot of need for dignified hospitality and care because we're not funding that. And it's built into the CBP-1 paradigm. We're putting that burden on Mexico. And Mexico is having to bear the brunt of that. And Mexico isn't prepared to do that. What you're seeing with the high number of deaths, what you're seeing with the high number of people who are still crossing the river, crossing the desert, entering irregularly, is just that CBP-1, it's a real systemic failure of CBP-1. It's not working. It can be part of the toolbox of things that work, but the government needs to expand its capacity, streamline it, make it more flexible, and make sure that we're prioritizing the vulnerable. Because right now, although it's working for many, it's not working for all. And that's why too many people are dying. And then finally, the last thing that's not working, and this is most fundamental, is the politics aren't working. The border has become hyper-politicized. It's an obstacle now to all immigration reform efforts. Republicans and now Democrats, and that's what we saw during the last negotiations. They've also come to the logic that there's a crisis at the border. Everybody. And that's a problem. The actions of Texas in recent months, in recent years, in recent days are truly demonic and fanning the flames of this politicization. And it's all political. Don't be deceived. When you get stuck in that logic of crisis, you can no longer see solutions. That's a fundamental problem. That's why what happened over the past couple months with even some Democrats in the White House was so disappointing because they were willing to give away the store. All concessions, nothing in return, and setting a really dangerous precedent for the future. So finally, a few things perhaps that we need to focus on as we think about what to do. You know, we really don't have an organized national campaign for promoting the rights of vulnerable migrants and asylum seekers in this country. We just don't in the faith space. And we need to work on that. From the perspective, our perspective here at the border, we need it, and we need it more than ever. If we're going to cut through the political logic, if we're going to protect the gains that we've made from erasure, if we're going to make progress, we need a national movement. We need a vision grounded in faith, grounded in hope, with structure and capacity to connect all the points of light between the border and the interior. Because again, there isn't a crisis here at the border, at least not the one that you think there is. There's no crisis of immigration. There's a crisis of imagination, of vision, of human vulnerability, of violence against women, of inequality, racism, political expediency, scapegoating. That's the crisis. We need to disabuse ourselves of the language of crisis, and we need a release of creativity to connect the work of welcome that we're doing here at the border, from San Diego to Arizona to Texas, with all the scrappy work and initiatives that people in faith communities across the whole country are engaged with every day to welcome newcomers. I think, you know, the other thing is we're all feeling a little bit spent and helpless now. I think a lot of us who have been involved in this for a long time, we're all feeling a bit helpless in the middle of a long Lent, maybe a little spent of ideas, a little spent of hope, maybe a little of afraid. But we need to be careful because that fear can't become apathy. It can't become despair. We're gonna get to change. The wall is coming down, friends. We're gonna get to reform, but we need to organize and we need to work together. Because this future, it's not a matter of chance. It's a matter of choice. It's not something we can afford just to simply sit around waiting for. It's something that we've got to achieve. And I know we can do it. We can do it together. The folks on this call, my colleagues, they're living proof of that. The work that's happening every day across the country is living proof of that. So let's keep each other energized and motivated, and let's get it done. There's a question, Kevin brought to my attention, one of the questions about something that happened in Texas recently. Texas has gone after one of our hospitality providers in El Paso. So let me just answer that question quick. Texas wants to shut it down. Faith-based organizations, and this is what makes those actions so viable. Faith-based organizations in particular have been picking up the pieces of a broken system for decades. This is a threat. This is a shot across the bow. It's an action designed for political effect. It's an action designed to have a chilling effect. The leader of Anunciation House, Ruben Garcia, he's a symbol of our resilience as a community, our ability to put faith into action, our deep moral convictions about the dignity of people who migrate. When they attack him, they're attacking all of us. The community will rally behind Ruben and Anunciation House. We'll stand together because that work represents the best of El Paso. It represents the best of the border, which is a welcoming, generous, can-do spirit focused on practical solutions, passion for doing what's right. And so we're not going to stop. The work of welcoming the migrant is a work of love. As Guerline said, it's a work of hope. It ennobles us, it enriches us, it makes us better people. And it's not a crisis. It's rebuilding the fabric of a broken America right now. And it's rebuilding the fabric of a broken Texas. I think that's all I'll say about the situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dylan, and thank you to all our speakers. We have quite a few questions in the chat, which we'll get to. I just wanted to ask Bishop Seitz up front. We're been reading the papers. We're in an election year, and the rhetoric against immigrants is going to be ramped up even more. We hear terms such as invasion, illegals, implications that all are coming are criminals, which is far from the truth. How do we, as Americans who care about this issue, and as also as the faith community, respond to some of this harsh rhetoric that dehumanize people, especially in this election year when it's going to be so rampant?
Well, I think the first aspect of my response would be the faith community has to continue to share the faith and the gospel, and to present a vibrant vision that was Jesus' vision about the dignity of every person, particularly of the poor, particularly of those who are on the margins. Read the Gospels. You don't have to really be a doctor of Scripture in order to get that point from the Scriptures. And we're going to have to remain faithful to that and strong in acclaiming it. In terms of helping people to grasp the truth of the issue beyond the rhetoric, I think we have to do better at sharing the stories. We heard some powerful ones from Joanna and Guerline, and those kinds of stories help us to recognize the humanity of the people that we're dealing with, that are not just pawns in this political game, but rather people upon whom who share our humanity, who are our brothers and sisters. When we begin with that fundamental piece, then we can begin developing a system that is orderly, that accounts for the reality of why people are leaving and where they can go. We can account for the need for immigrants in our country, and at the same time make sure that they're coming in a way that allows an orderly process.
Thank you, Bishop. We do have a couple of questions on Annunciation House, which broke yesterday. Just a couple of comments on that. Abbott and Paxson are shameless. I mean, what are they going to do next? Start taking candy from babies to make a political point? I mean, the Catholic Church and other faith-based organizations coordinate with the federal government, help the federal government do their job in responding to migrants who cross the border. They're not the enemy. And to go down this road and start persecuting faith-based organizations in order to make political points is wrong-headed. We've seen this throughout history, where Catholics, Christians, Jews, Muslims, all faiths have served, their mission in assisting others who are in need. And to attack that for political points is just shameful. And I just thought that it needs a strong response. So we're going to go.
Kevin, may I say something?
Yes.
One thing you just mentioned is what's next? Will they be taking candies for babies? I have witnessed that happen, where children will be holding a piece of candy or a toy, a teddy bear. Those will be taken from them just for because pure evil. So really, this has been happening. And in addition, I think for us as believers, I woke up this morning as a Christian, as a missionary, but also an immigrant, a Haitian American. And I think through all of this, people of faith need to stand strong on the fact that through migration is where the heart of God is. If we want to really look into our base, if we want to follow Christ, they themselves were asylum seekers. They themselves were fleeing and seeking for protection. And I saw some questions about how do we move forward. And I think that we need to be in the heart of God when it comes to people in migration and be able to stand on those principles and pushing our elected officials, both locally and on the federal level, to do the right thing and to center any policies on the fact that we must protect, we must welcome with compassion and dignity, because this is what we have been called to do. I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Guerline. So we're going to go to some questions in the chat. There was one question about the mayors that are receiving migrants and how they can be supported. Anyone want to take that in terms of what the federal government is or should be doing to support local communities who are receiving migrants? I mean, one thing to point out is there was money in the supplemental to help the mayors and to help local communities. Another thing that they were trying to do is to expedite work authorization, so it would certainly help in those situations to allow people to find jobs. And we need the workers in many of these communities. So there are things that are out there that have been proposed. Congress has not shown the will to make them happen.
In addition to that, what we are proposing is a resettlement where the federal government can support the resettlement of asylum seekers. It's nothing new. We have resettlement agencies for refugees. How about we open a window where we can provide resettlement for 3, 5, 6 months as we are supporting folks to get on their feet, because that will allow them to get their Social Security, the work permit, and start working, paying taxes, and invest in our economy, in our communities.
Yes, I might add also, in the last big surge, 2018-19, we were left pretty much receiving people on our own. Anunciation House and other NGOs and the church were receiving people with our own resources and the best we could. One thing that has improved in this surge is that we've had government, the federal government through FEMA, and then also our local government entities, the county and the city, assisting us in major ways. And so yes, we need to continue to collaborate, to all work together, because this is a big enough issue that it takes all hands on deck.
We have other questions. There's a question from Arelis Hernandez. I'll read it, and I don't want to interpret it, but The border deal signaled a shift for National Democrats and newly elected New York Democrat won on a campaign about border security. What does this change in attitude in the party mean for the work of faith organizations? Are you hopeful that any Democrat talking about border security provide an opening to have a broader conversation about the border and immigration?
So maybe I can jump in on that one. I think, for us, we didn't just see the shift in National Democrats in this recent round. It's something that we in the state of Arizona live with Senator Kelly and Senator Sinema, who was a Democrat and is now an independent. And I remember very distinctly when Senator Kelly supported some legislation to extend and further institute Title 42 when it seemed like Title 42 was going to end the second or third time, not the fourth or fifth time when it actually did end. And my staff was our team was sort of thinking about what do we do in the face of this, a Democrat who really is supporting a Trump era policy. And what we landed on at the time is Senator Kelly is making a political decision. Either he's wrong and we would need to prove him wrong on the politics of this, or he's right and we need to change the politics of this. And I think where I'm landing more and more is in working towards that longer term change. There's a number of other questions in the chat, in the Q&A about narrative change. And I think to Dylan's point as well, we need to not just be in a crisis response to the legislation of the moment, but we need to be doing the slow, hard work of helping people change hearts and minds. And in order to do that, we need to believe in the potential for conversion, which is a very Catholic, theology and teaching. And I think in our society is becoming more and more unusual that we can believe that people can convert, that people can be touched by an encounter with Christ, and that can transform their lives. But we can be agents of that through creating spaces of encounter with our migrant brothers and sisters. And I think for many years, and this is a self-criticism of me, of us, even us as an organization and us as our larger movement, we've believed that it's enough to be morally right. And I don't think that that's actually adequate. I think we need to be both aligned with Catholic teaching. We need to be morally right, but we also need to be very strategic, because those who don't believe in the dignity of immigrants are very strategic in their messaging and their narrative and how they've created fear in the communities. So we need to be equally strategic in how we're inviting people to encounter an openness and conversion. And we see the potential of it. So we've done some presentations in more conservative areas using communications best practices. We do surveys also on what are people's mentality around the border. It's really only about 6 to 10% that are incredibly hardened in saying the border needs to be closed, we shouldn't welcome migrants. The vast majority of the American public just feels very confused about this and doesn't know how to make sense. They're not buying into necessarily the Kino border initiative's interpretation, but nor are they hardened in their beliefs. So there's a large swath of the population that is open to this potential. And we found that creating spaces of encounter in which we not just tell stories, but we tell stories in a way that's more about what is similar than what's different. So maybe a different way that I would tell, for example, the story of the mom that was looking for her son isn't just in the tragedy of impunity, but saying, I'm a mom too. I have a 3-year-old. If my 3-year-old disappeared, what lengths I wouldn't go to find my 3-year-old and to demand justice. Because we really do have so much in common. We oftentimes tell stories from a way that people are heroes or they're villains, and not just they're ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances. And that knitting together of the ordinary is really what we see for this potential for conversion. So I'm sort of, in a way, I'm rejecting the premise of the question of, I think if we're too focused on what the political wins of the moment are, then we're losing energy for the longer term work of changing social perception, creating political will from a grassroots level. And that's where I think that our strength is as a church. And that's also where I think that we could be much more strategic than we currently are.
Thanks, Joanna. We have a question from Ed Hart. Is there any movement towards expanding the federal immigration court system and its employees so as to expedite hearings and to adequately provide legal counsel to asylum seekers or undocumented immigrants? Anyone want to take a shot at that? There is in the discussion the idea of providing more resources to reduce the backlogs, which are a significant issue. In fact, there was some money in the original supplemental to hire more immigration judges. If you want to learn more about that, Center for Migration Studies has 2 studies on our website as to the backlog and what needs to be done about the backlog, but also the number of immigration judges that would be needed to reduce the backlog and for how long. If you go to cmsny.org, you can get all the information you want on that particular issue. The one thing I would say, however, is that it shouldn't shortcut due process or not give someone enough time to find an attorney and to prepare for their case. There are some proposals that say we can do it in 2 weeks. That's not sufficient. You need to have time for an asylum seeker to find a legal representation and to prepare their case in order to truly serve justice in this situation. Okay, I mean, there are a lot of questions here on what can we do as advocates? How can we create a national system to welcome migrants who are, released into the country legally, of course. And what kind of advocacy should we focus on to get us back to a debate where we're talking about looking at all aspects of the system. We're emphasizing, we're not sacrificing the human rights of people, and that's a non-issue, which it is now. Anyone want to take a shot at that?
Just a couple words. I think we need to weave into a coherent narrative and a coherent strategy, all the good work that's happening across the country and at the border. As Joanna said, we need to have the savvy too, to be able to deploy that. We need to build the power that we need as a faith community, working in collaboration with others to be able to make a difference politically, to translate our ideals into practice, and just weave these different points of light together. One thing you can do, if you're doing good work in the interior, send it to me. Let me know by email. Send it to us. We want to know at the border that the work that we're doing here in Vain to welcome people is connected to the work in the middle of the country. Let us know. Send me a photo of it. Send us an email. Let's begin to organize this together. Because it's urgent. It's urgent that we begin to take action together, that we coalesce. It's a long-term fight, but we need the structure and support to keep each other going.
Thanks, Dylan. We're coming up to the hour. I'd just like to throw out one more question, or a couple of questions in the chat about one of the bishops speak out more on immigration. We have here the chairman of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops who speaks out often on the issue. And we also have a pope, by the way, who's made immigration one of his signature issues. So I wouldn't accept the premise that the bishops or the church doesn't speak out on this issue. Bishop, I don't know if you wanted to respond to that or not.
Saw that question. I was kind of surprised because I think we've been speaking really quite a bit on this issue. We're very committed to the life of the unborn child, but I think the Bishops' Conference has been a major voice in the country on issues of the dignity of the person who immigrates. And Lord knows, I'm certainly trying in my position to put out statements. If you go to the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops and Migration and Refugee Services, you'll find many statements that have been made. I've been to Washington many times. We are at work in the country through Catholic Charities and through so many different organizations. Tell me another institution or organization that's doing what the Catholic Church is doing. saying what the Catholic Church is saying.
Thank you, Bishop. I just would invite anyone who wants to put in a last word or a last statement before we sign off. Everything's been said. Great.
I'll just say, I think Dylan's point was extremely important for us right now, because I know most of you all who are signed in on this Zoom are people who are already very committed, and we're taking some hits right now, you know, right to the gut on our work. There's an effort in the country to demonize the work of charity that we're doing, as well as the search for justice. But know that we are not alone. The Lord is on our side. Don't give up hope, because you know, this kind of struggle is one that is part of the Christian effort to transform the world, and we know who wins.
Well, thank you. That's a great place to stop, Bishop, and thank you for that message. And we'd like to thank everyone for participating today. The webinar has been recorded and will be posted on our website, cmsny.org, either later today or tomorrow. And I presume that maybe with some of the other organizations involved may do that as well. So if you missed part of it or you want to hear it again, it will be available. Thank you all very much, and thank you again to our speakers. Have a great day.